All right, great. Thanks everybody for joining the OpenJS Foundation's Security Collab Space meeting. We meet weekly on Mondays at this time, 2 p.m. Eastern time. Yeah, let's get things started. Do we have any announcements to start with? No? Great. Then we will kind of just dig into the agenda then. So I noticed, and it's on the agenda here, the first item is something that you opened up, Ben, last week, discuss request for information on open source software security, areas of long-term focus and prioritization. You want to share more?
I can share a little bit more. Ben wants to share a little bit more. An RFI is coming from the U.S. Federal government, looking at particular areas where we or other folks may have expertise on shaping kind of the future direction of their policies. So I would like us as OpenJS to respond. I'm also on a thread with OpenSSF and the Python Software Foundation about doing some coordinated response in some areas. David Wheeler's taken the point on that. And I said, yeah, we'll coordinate, but I'd still like to have our own unique point of view on where we should focus. So kind of financial stability and sustainability, I thought was something that we could hit, because ideally I'd like to encourage the US government to fund open source, much like the German government is doing on the security and infrastructure front. So if we were to pick one or two things for us to hit, that's what I would do, anything that kind of moves them in that direction.
Okay.
I think what I would encourage folks is maybe to spend some time reading through it. It looks longer than it is. It's pretty well organized to flip through. And then maybe we can discuss next week. We have until November-ish for a deadline. So we have a bit of time, but would love for you to, to read it, noodle on it, and then we can make it a point of discussion either this coming Monday, or if you all need more time with summer holidays, we can reconvene in a couple of weeks.
Robin,
Sorry,
go ahead, Joe. I didn't mean to talk over you.
No, I was just going to say we have a couple of good comments already there to start with, but why don't you go ahead, Ben?
I was just going to ask Robin, what is the thing that is going to be created here? Is it like a written document that's going to be authored with recommendations in it? Like, what is actually provided as part of this RFI from us?
That's what I expect, although, sausage making in Washington, D.C. can be cumbersome. There's an interim cyber security director right now, so they are going through some change. What I would like to do is be a resource when, I know folks have gone to Washington and been advocates for open source. So I'd like to kind of do that as well and have a program to make sure that our voices are heard. So I guess the answer is, we'll see. I know there have been, smaller convenings. I haven't seen larger convenings yet, but just want to make sure that we're heard as the policies come together. I think what the OpenSSF is hearing, that they're going to encourage industry to fund and solve things. That hopefully isn't the only solution, because many of you are already doing that through your companies. But I think we need to do more, particularly for JavaScript.
So is the idea that like you would likely be called upon to speak or be a subject matter expert, and that this is really a gathering information from the work group, so you have essentially like the right talking points and things? Is that right?
It's not necessarily called, you really still have to be an advocate and reach out and be connected to get included. I spent most of my career doing public affairs, so tech policy. So it is that there could be hearings, there could be workshops. Those could be hosted by government or industry in Washington. So I think essentially we just want to make sure we have a seat at the table and are really clear in what are like the top points that we as the open source industry want to do through all of our friends at the LF and Python and other organizations, Eclipse. And then what's the one or two things that we really need for our ecosystem. So yeah, I guess it's not just one thing. It would be a series of things.
Regardless, a document kind of outlining the
Mhm.
important things is a good start. Okay.
Mhm.
And maybe we want to, figure out some sort of timeline. If there is a
Yeah.
deadline, then work backwards from there.
Mhm.
We can start working.
The nice thing is through our work with OpenSSF or jQuery, we're already planning to reach out to some of those government agencies and things like that for kind of a consumer education campaign on security. So hopefully we'll make a dent this year and elevating kind of the urgency of the issue.
Okay, great. Do we want to kind of throw ideas into the issue here, or do you think we should already start putting like a doc together to sort of pull things and categorize them and such? We can just start with the issue for now and then go from there.
Why don't we keep an issue and then let's maybe next week or a week, 2 weeks from now, I guess 2 weeks from now it's a holiday, but we can this group is pretty good brainstorming and riffing off each other. I think it would be nice to spend some time doing that.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, we have not this week, but next week there's a CPC working session too, if we wanted to invite folks to that and discuss it there.
That's a good idea.
All right. Help me remember that as an idea tomorrow.
Will do.
Cool. All right, great. Anything else we want to talk about on this issue? We can move along. We've only got 3 on the agenda here. So number 2 is having a centralized signing tool for our tool chain. And does this I guess really relates to the next issue, which is maybe the one that we should talk more about. It seems, which is the create a prescriptive best practices tool chain. I know 2 weeks ago, Ben created a Google Doc for categories, which we haven't really gotten much in there yet. I mean, we've gotten 0 in there. So do we want to spend some time talking about what a tool chain would look like for the JavaScript community or best practices guidance? Jordan?
Yeah, I had when 46 was created, I wasn't sure. There's no description, so I had no idea what that was about, and then forgot to ask. But if you want to talk about 45 instead.
Yeah, I mean, we could get clarity on 46 if we want first. And I think we were having a discussion and I threw that issue up there just to like capture it, but I'm not exactly sure.
I mean, for the JavaScript ecosystem, the best practices are all going to be published to NPM, which already is the central signer for everything. So like we get all the security features that OpenSSF is trying to push everywhere for basically free, since everything's on NPM already, and NPM's had those for a decade. So I feel like it's just as long as we make sure that the tools we recommend are on NPM, then everything's good.
Mm-hmm.
And then as far as like prescriptive best practices, I mean, that's sort of tricky because like we would have to be opinionated. Otherwise we'd end up just listing too many alternatives to be useful. So like, and this is something I wanted to talk about later in the meeting as well, but like on my document about the best practices badge, I like go out, I intentionally say things like, you're obviously already using ESLint, right? Because I want to really convey that like, that is the de facto standard. And if you aren't aware of it, you should go educate yourself. And if you are aware of it, like, you don't get a cookie. That's just a minimum, right? Like, that's sort of the sense I wanted to convey. And so like, I feel like if we really want a useful prescriptive best practice toolchain, it has to be kind of at that level. Like, you have to use ESLint. You know, if you're using TypeScript, you should be using the strict config setting, or I don't know, like things like that. Like, if you use Prettier, here's how you should be using it, or, you know, I don't know, whatever those are probably not all the same, like not all those tools may not be in what we recommend, but like, that's the sort of emotion I expect behind a best practices recommendation. Something that in as polite a manner as possible incepts in you to feel a little foolish if you're not going out of your way to do these things.
Yeah.
But that, you know, I don't know if everyone else agrees that that's the right tone to take, but that is what I've found useful, like in the Airbnb style guide, or when I argue about things in GitHub issues and stuff. That's what seems to be the best combo of education and recommendation for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, of course, I think we'll have to just be mindful of tone and how we position.
Yeah, I mean, we have to be diplomatic and, you know, follow our code of conduct and all of those things, of course.
Yeah.
But there's still some art in phrasing something in a way that is perfectly fine, but is likely to engender an emotional response, and that is the response that we want, right? And I think that that's the art in having to word these things, and it's extra difficult coming from the foundation, where like the foundation has to maintain way more neutrality than most arenas.
Yeah,
so like,
I would say from doing this internally at a large corporation, it's a exercise of futility in some cases. I can't imagine doing it for the open source community in general.
Right, and it's probably going to end up being vague, defer to, you know, I just like don't want to list like 17 possible linting things and be like, just figure it out, because that's like not very useful for anyone. I'd rather say nothing and then like let people Google and then find the guides that say, no, use this. Like,
yeah. Okay, that makes sense. I'll close this issue with the comment about NPM will likely be the signing tool. So for now, I'll close this issue.
Before you close it.
Too late.
Oh, did you close it already? That's all right.
I can reopen it.
No, it's fine. I just wanted to be sure, like, maybe I was imagining this a little differently, and like if folks are all agreed, then like we can just move on. But like I was kind of imagining that we'd have like all of these categories of things that you do as part of creating a JS project, and like NPM is one of those things, like doing a release, right, creating a package. But there seems to me there's a lot more than that. Like we were just talking about like linting and yada yada yada. So I don't know if I don't know if there's still value in doing that or not, or if what Steve's saying is like, look, this is just like, you could do it, but like, it's not actually going to be useful. That's fine. I just want to be sure that like, I was thinking about this in the same way that other folks on this call were, and that there's real consensus on whether or not we should move forward with this or not.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question I have is this guidance for like, if you're building a JavaScript, you know, application that you wouldn't publish to NPM, then is that outside of this assumption?
Yeah. I mean, I think what you're describing, Ben, if we're able to make it, and that's a nod to Steve's comment, right? Then I think that having that would be valuable, and especially if it's phrased as a sort of decision tree where we're asking the right questions. And a question that like NPM init continues to fail to ask is this an application, or are you going to publish it as a library, right? Or like, you know, things like that, because the answers to those questions drastically change what the best practices are and what the requirements are versus what like is nice to have, and, you know, and all those things. Yeah. And so if we come up with something that has that appropriate decision tree that's very clear, so that someone moving through it can quickly ignore the things that don't apply to them and see the things that really do, then I think that's hugely valuable, whether it lives with OpenJS or not. The advantage of doing it in OpenJS is that it's backed by an organization, and that we have the chance to circulate it among stakeholders like credible stakeholders before it starts getting broadly recommended. You know, it's not just, it won't just be like one guy with a blog or like some company that might be trying to push an agenda. It's like, no, this is actually what we all kind of agree is best. Like, I think that is valuable. Whether we can achieve it, as Steve indicates, like that is a big question. I don't know.
Matt?
Yeah, I thanks for the issue link. So in terms of signing tool, you know, NPM client clearly by now has SIG-Store integration, so it can clearly sign package uploads or creations. But in terms of generalized signing tool that can be used throughout the pipeline, I don't know if NPM can be leveraged for that. I think we even suggested that we needed like a blob signing mechanism from cosign, because you know, like it's part of the build. If you create a tool chain or whatever, where you're doing linting or whatever you're doing to touch the code during the CI process, any artifacts you create should be signed through a signing service. And I don't know if NPM is set up or conceived to do those things.
For anything that ends up being published, NPM has been doing that for over a decade. So like that is long since been achieved. It's everyone else that's trying to catch up. But if it's an application, that's different. You'd have to sign them yourself. But then it's like the value of putting it in a public service versus just signing it for your own verification is, I think, more debatable.
Well, I was thinking about it. If that's what the value for saying the centralized one is, no one has, it's the easy button, as I keep saying. Right. So whatever you're doing in your pipeline, if you're producing attestations, you're putting a bill of materials, you're producing, test results, you're producing serif data, you're backing up your whatever you're trying to get PCI compliant, whatever you're doing, if I have a signing source, no matter what tool I'm implementing, any output needs to be signed and attested to. That's kind of what the goal was.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it's an application you are deploying, then like, I don't think there is an obvious easy button for how to sign all those sorts of things, or what should be signed, or how you gather up things and like know oh, here's our checklist of these 15 things and we've signed 13 of them. Like I don't know if anyone even has the answers to those questions in a generic sense yet. If we could come up with that, that seems useful.
Yeah,
but
well,
for packages,
I thought you were on the path of suggesting a solution with using the blob signage from cosign SIG-Store a couple weeks ago.
Oh, I mean, maybe if like, I think that seems like a reasonable place to put the signatures. It's more just like, I don't think anybody knows what's to be signed yet. And what things should be signed? How do I verify those things? Like, how do I know if I've signed all the right things for my application and so on? But that's not usually an application that's distributed in the JavaScript ecosystem. That's an application you're deploying to your own web server. The applications that people tend to make in the JavaScript ecosystem are executables on NPM, and then NPM signs everything. So like, I don't think you need anything extra there. And if you do, like NPM would be the place to put it, but like,
well,
I'm saying think there's
in terms of like you're creating a tool chain and backed by like if you created a however you want to sign it, whether it be cosign or whatever, if you had like a GitHub action where you could say, here, put your project credentials here in your GitHub action and project information. So when you're creating the in toto records or tough records, it can fill them out properly. And then, whatever I want to sign, I just invoke this GitHub action wherever I need to invoke it in my workflow, and I just pass it in whatever file or log or bomb or whatever I'm producing.
Right.
Signs it for you, right?
But like, if what you're doing ends up published to NPM, the contents of the tarball are all that matters, and that's what gets signed by NPM already and has for a long time.
It's backing up to like OpenJS projects, not just NPM packages, right? So, or NPM itself.
Other than Node, would like, yeah, I mean, I guess that's true. Like, there is a couple projects that aren't published to NPM, but the vast majority of, like, I was imagining that the audience of this document would be the majority of JavaScript developers, for which everything is published to NPM or deployed to their own servers, and there's no exceptions.
Well, I'm saying reverting back to the OSTIP list of most critical projects, that includes a bunch of projects that are not NPM. So they need a guidance and perhaps the easy button for signing and doing these things that are not doing, right?
Okay. I'm trying to find the issue for that. What's on that list besides Node that's not on NPM?
I'm not sure. What,
like jQuery's on NPM and
And it just says,
trying
I
to
mean,
find the
it's about a foundational tool belt, you know,
right.
just any project.
But I guess that's,
come
I
along.
question, I'm sort of questioning the value of that, because the number of projects that in the JavaScript ecosystem that will ever need anything beyond NPM is like probably 2 digits.
But then can you extrapolate or abstract what NPM's done and make it franchisable to other projects easily?
I mean, yeah, I think that's what OpenSSF's efforts are doing, for trying to push everything into Sigstore and stuff.
And again, I don't know what NPM's doing, so it might be a very convoluted process where they have to generate their own GPG keys and install custom tools, and that doesn't sound like the easy button for me necessarily, and it won't encourage other projects even if it's single digits to even replicate that.
If we start by thinking about this less as an actual tool chain and more as like a document, I feel like we have like a matrix here of different types of, you know, projects, tools, applications. And we should kind of lay out all the different components that you would be thinking about and, you know, for lack of a better term here, a tool chain. But there might be different advice for each area, for each type of, you know, project. And maybe in the signing, it's just like, you know, if you're using NPM, you're already good. If you're not, you know, here's our guidance.
Yeah, it's much like Apache Foundation, like has a document the infrastructure team produces saying, here's how we do, here's our rules for signing. So it's still not an easy button. It's still very complicated. And you're left as your own device where you store your keys and things like that as a project. So maybe we can even do better than, you know, what I've seen at other foundations do.
Yeah, and maybe that's just a starting point, and we do new tools come along and we find out ways to make it easier, but we start somewhere.
And my hope was, like you said, you know, you opened my eyes yourself, Jordan, when you talked about, because Cosign has containerized signing tools already. I was hoping that we could grab a container and say, here's a GitHub action, and we provide some parameters to it. And all I gotta do is say, hey, create this little file and add it to your repo when you build, run this action, and then pass in the file you want to sign, and that's it. It's, you know, to me, it's the documentation is harder than actually sometimes coding a containerized based tool that can do it for you quickly.
Yeah, I think I agree that I think the challenge there is explaining what needs to be done and what should be signed and why that's valuable. And I think I'm not sure that explanation is concisely available yet, but if that exists, then like I think that combined with a GitHub action sounds like a great solution.
Yeah, I was working from like foundational out, like you can't build a house without the foundation, and the foundation for security output is that it be signed and attested to. So it's foundational to me. It's a foundational capability of any tool chain or workflow or anything.
Okay.
So, you know, I think we're on a good conversation here, and we don't have anything else on the agenda. And I wonder if, you know, we should just share a screen and start kind of working through what the categories for best practices, you know, tool chain, for lack of a better term, would be, and kind of start to work through things. Does that seem like a good use of our time, or what do y'all want to do?
I did want to spend a couple minutes, but it can be at the end, just chatting about the best practices badge doc. I've received feedback from 2 people. So, yeah. So I got some feedback from Ben and from Ulysses, which is, I appreciate it from both of you. I responded to most of it. There's some other things left. And one of the things is what I wanted to talk about, which I alluded to earlier, right? Like I have something where I'm talking about in the section where it's talking about secure delivery against man-in-the-middle attacks. And I said, obviously you publish on NPM, right? And I'm not like attached to that tone super strongly, but like Ben raised a question about it. And so, you know, not everyone will publish on NPM, but the vast majority will. And I would expect that those that aren't are prepared to defend themselves if someone asks them why they're not publishing on NPM. And like, I'm comfortable with the edge cases falling into the bucket of go ask in the Slack channel. or like file an issue or something, like however we want to do it, like because the vast majority of people will be publishing on NPM for libraries. And yeah, I guess I should word it slightly differently since applications can be reading this too. But like the main question was like, is there tonal recommendations from this group? Should I avoid something? Should I stick with that rough tone and make sure it's just accurate and covers things? Or like, what are people's thoughts? Because I just kind of wrote this, you know, quasi whimsically, and like, it's totally fine if there's feedback about that. But I don't know if the rest of y'all have taken a look at it yet, because I've only gotten comments from 2 folks. So.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the link. We're not.
Oh, sure. I will
we're not
drop
talking
it.
about this isn't the SBOM one, right? This is the other one.
Correct. This is the other one. So the link is in the Zoom chat. Oh, there you go. Thank you.
Yeah. Would it be helpful for me to share my screen?
That's fine too.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, and I'm happy like making this public and like seeking further feedback once this group is generally okay with it. I just didn't want to like have to do tons of iteration with y'all while other people were looking at drafts.
What browser are you using, Ben? Because my comments are a mess on HackM.
I'm using Arc, but yeah,
That's Chrome, right?
It's
Oh,
basically
I see.
Chrome, but it's
I clicked that button and now it looks like yours. Okay.
yeah, it's a little, there's a little bit of a learning curve on this one.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, let me just give a little context of why I sort of provided that feedback. I felt that it read a little like, I don't know, like, you know, you're going to have folks who are reading these guidelines with a real variety of expertise and levels. And like, my concern would be someone who might be more junior or who isn't doing that might feel bad, right, when they read it. Like, wait, obviously, wait a minute, I'm not doing that. Or like, surely you're doing something and it's when you're not. So, you know, it's minor, like you could change the wording to be like, you are most likely using NPM. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Like that. Yeah.
And I think that sort of was my intent a little bit, was to be kind of like I'm imagining I'm reading it as a junior, and if a document is saying something like obviously you're already doing this, or like this goes without saying, and then because if it doesn't for me, I'm going to be like, ooh, I should know that, and I'm going to go do research. But that's me, and maybe other people will be differently affected. So like I said, I'm not attached to the tone. That was just the intention behind it.
I think like, you know, because this is supposed to be a guide, then based on what you said, I would say it's probably important to then call out like, why NPM, right? Like, why is that such an expected thing? Maybe.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So I'll go to all those places that you've called out, and any of, if there's others that I notice as well, and I'll rephrase it to be kind of like, you know, maybe like in the sidebar or something, like publishing on NPM is good for these reasons, or, you know, something like that. And then say, you know, because of that, you should now hopefully be publishing on NPM or something like that. And then, you know, and I can also add in some little caveat that's like, if you think this doesn't apply to you, please feel free to ask us, and we'll, you know, we can clarify, because there are edge cases, right? Like I can definitely be magnanimous in the writing.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think that's the right approach. And I think you're capturing what's important there, which is like, in you saying obviously or whatever, like there's actually some important information that's not in there that you just said, right?
Yeah, I'm imagining it being more of a dialogue, but you're right. This is a document. I'm not going to have the chance to go back and forth with them. So yeah, that's good context. I will apply that. And I think there was one where I said maybe it's a tonal thing as well, about having CI that runs on every PR and push to the default branch. And you said something about seems out of place in a best practices recommendation. This is under automated test suite and Go for passing, under quality. Yeah, I would rephrase one. Yeah, and so like the rephrasing part we just discussed, but like having CI is like the point of this whole badge. So I'm assuming that's an okay thing to recommend.
Yeah, like you should have CI that runs.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But I mean, I can, as we discussed, I can clarify with more rationale for it.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
And don't
Okay.
call me Shirley. And don't call me Shirley.
Yeah.
Anyone? No.
Turkish prison. Yes, I would, I like kind of some of the approach that you've taken here, but I would try to avoid things like obviously or surely.
Okay, that's fine.
But there's certainly wording that we could use, like this is the most common approach to this or what have you.
That's fine. Yeah, it's this is not going to have my name broadly atop it, like, so it doesn't have to be in whatever my voice would be. It needs to be all of our voice. So that's fine. I will adapt to that. I'm getting head nods from other folks, so like it's clearly not just one person that has this opinion.
And English is a second language. Just got to be careful to keep it simple.
That's fair too.
Yeah. I mean, I like the sort of narrative approach you've taken. I do wonder if we're going to need to get away from that just to be more, this is a guide kind of thing. I don't know.
Maybe so. Yeah. I guess I was trying to think of it as, so it feels less tedious of like, now I got this long checklist. And then when you get sent those emails, I'm hoping Joe can still hear from a distance. When you get those emails that are like, fill out a survey, and then you click on it and you do 1 or 2 pages, and it's like the progress bar is only like a tiny bit filled. And it takes very short time before I'm like, screw this. And I close the tab. And like, I want people to finish this process. And so I'm trying to like hold their interest. That was my thought process. But if we need to tweak it, that's fine. Again, like I'm not attached.
Are we capturing Matt's notes in the chat? Because that disappears when we close our Zoom.
Matt, could you, I mean, I can capture them, but alternatively, if you can leave comments in the HackMD, that would be super helpful.
If somebody could help me, I'd appreciate it. I am
sure.
Super multitasking at this point.
No problem. Let me, besides silver. Branch protections are turned on.
Yeah, so
Right.
You look at CII best practices, just saying go for silver, I think needs more depth in terms
so
of.
I haven't actually completed it. If you notice that the last 3 subheadings under basics, for example, are not filled in, and there's a bunch more after basics. I was getting I kind of paused the document to get feedback on the way I was writing it before I continued exhaustively going through everything. And I'm very confident that branch protections is in one of those upcoming sections that I need to document. So I will definitely make sure it's in there, because I agree with you that has to be a requirement.
I'm saying that, be prescriptive and outline which checks for silver we want them to pass, and which ones we think are must-haves, if you will.
Right. Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, yeah, if my hip from the hip instinct here is make sure you're running tests, unit and or integration tests, and make sure you're running your linter and CI, and make sure that those things are required to pass. I can add in things like if you have a build process, make sure the build process completes, and blah blah blah.
Yeah, I said. I mean, I'm hoping that you can lift and shift over the stuff scorecards produced for the various checks that they have, and reinforce these. If they want to read more, and if they want to even take the next step towards scorecard, if they get their silver badge, they should be able to turn on those checks and run scorecard if they want to. As the next step.
Yeah, and that's actually a good call. Is there's certainly on the silver part, at least, I can add in things saying like the OSSF OpenSSF scorecards have additional requirements beyond this program. Here's a link to how you can follow them, and then you can, and I would have to explain why the scorecard is a good thing to meet. I won't be doing that for exhaustively, I think, because not everything the scorecard recommends is universally agreed with, but for branch protections, for example, certainly it is.
If you can see each of the checks has a severity like critical, high, whatever. If we can say these are the ones we'd like you to enable, these are critical and high ones, and make sure they're on the list. That just saying arbitrarily 7 out of 10, is not give them prescriptive guidance of which ones we consider critical and high and should be done.
Right. And I could even actually add another section after Go for Silver that's talks about the scorecard stuff, and I can link down to it. So when we're at the branch protection best practice badge, you have a link that jumps you down to the scorecard branch protection section. And that way I have more room to elaborate about those checks and not try to have to fit them in within the badge program.
Yep.
But yeah, as I write it, I'll figure out whether inline or separate is a better fit. But yeah, good call out. I mean, I have not completed this document, right? I got 80% of the way through and then wanted to get feedback.
Yeah, no worries. Just trying to leave the breadcrumbs for the towards the future.
Cool. Thank you.
And this is great work, Jordan. It's a
Thanks.
lot.
No,
Cool.
I can.
But yes, that's the main thing. And then
I love the organization. I just wanted to say this organization is great.
thank you. I appreciate that. And then, yeah, feel free to continue to leave comments on the doc at any time. I will continue to adapt it. And at, the next meeting or a future meeting of this group, we can all decide when we think it's ready to go public. And at that point, further changes would be through GitHub.
Jordan, I think I know this, but I want to just be sure. When are you
Yeah.
targeting for this one to be complete?
I hadn't really come up with a date yet. It seems prudent to do it before the end of September so that we can fit it into the quarter. So I was probably going to come back to it after I'd made more progress on the secure releases and CVE management stuff.
Yeah.
But you and I can discuss reorganizing that timeline however you like.
I mean, I think from my perspective, yeah, it definitely needs to be done by the end of the quarter, right?
Sure.
I would just say, yeah, if you want to, we don't have a ton of security collab working group meetings, and we talked about this too. So
that's fair. Yeah.
I think it's helpful maybe if we can tell folks like, hey, we'll do a final review on this day, whatever. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it would be, let me just pull out the calendar and see when our next Collab Space meetings are. Today, we have one next week. We probably don't have one on Labor Day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we can call it the 11th. So on September 11th, I will have completed the document by then and addressed any feedback I have before that. And then that will be the meeting where we, note 16, end of life, cool. That'll be the day where we target getting this group's approval so that it can be ready to be made public. And then that gives us a full 3 weeks before the end of the quarter to, make a PR.
Yeah. Well, you had a lot of other stuff to do. So like getting this one
Yes.
out the door will probably feel good. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. September 11th, final review. Perfect.
Great.
Thanks.
Excellent. Well, this was good. Going over that doc. Thanks for sharing, Ben, and for everyone for going through that. We have 10 minutes left. I guess, first of all, there's that question on the screen there. I'm assuming we should cancel on September 4th. I hate to be like US holiday centric, but since most of us are US based, I certainly won't be here. Anybody opposed to canceling? Nope. Okay, then I will take it off the calendar. Do we want to give time back or try to make any progress on anything else? I'm gonna say let's just call it a wrap. Yeah. All right. Cool. Well, all right. Another good meeting, folks. I really appreciate everyone coming and participating, and take a look at that document we're just looking at, add some more comments, and the other issue too that we looked at earlier with the Federal Register document. Let's try to work on that and the interim as well, and we will just meet up again soon. Cool. Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.